All right. Yeah. My stuff's broken again. I don't know. I'm in a bit of a hurry today. I didn't have as much time to prepare this morning, but I got a bunch of my links and stuff ready so that we can cover stuff today. So I've got that much going at least. How's everyone doing? Happy Saturday. We made it. Almost, basically. We're here. Let's see. What's happening with me? We bought a new car because we sold our rental property and we dropped $17,000 on a new car. It's not brand new. It's a 2019. It's the newest car I've ever had. It's a Kia Sportage. It's kind of a compact SUV. So we've got that. We still owe, I don't know, 10 grand on it or something like that. But yeah, we've got that new car, which is nice. For the first time my whole life, it's the newest thing. It's actually got GPS and backing, camera and stuff like that. So it's really nice. Even though I'm not really going to have any chances to drive it because my wife drives it. I'm an introvert. I stay home. I work at home. And if I do end up having to drive something, I'll probably drive our other car, which won't get a whole lot of use. And that's, I don't know, 2012 Nissan Pathfinder, which is leaking oil like crazy. So that's probably what I'm going to end up driving most of the time. Much to my chagrin. Got my daughter's computer put together and it's downstairs and she's starting to use it and I've got to teach her how to use that. There's still stuff I need to do on that. Oh, I'm also I have two, in my house I have two routers, one for downstairs, one for the upstairs for my office. And I need to figure out how my family downstairs can access our NAS upstairs. I know there's a way using my, what are they, Netgear routers? Netgear? What are they? Hold on. Netgear. Yeah, Netgear. I have a Nighthawk 7000 and a newer XR 500. The 500 is downstairs and is the primary one to distribute internet, wireless downstairs. And then up here, we've got the 7000, which is older. So there's a way to do it, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how yet. I have to figure out the settings to do that. What else is going on? Not a whole lot. Work is going good, still doing accessibility stuff. I think that's it. Anyone have any, is anyone doing anything fun at all? We've got our last session next Sunday for our current campaign. It's a 5e conversion of a Pathfinder adventure. A Pathfinder adventure path dealing with vampires, I guess. So we'll have our big final battle next week. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll start our Spelljammer, which I'm super excited for. I'm playing a female dwarven wizard. And she's kind of going the Gish route. She's, I think, a mountain dwarf, so she starts with heavy light and medium armor, and then I picked up Artificer, so I get shields, so I have like an AC of 18 with the shield, and done casting spells, so that's kind of nice. Yeah, that's all with me. Is that it? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Things have quieted down, got most of our money spent. And yeah, what's up with you guys? How's your lives going? You doing anything fun this weekend? Oh, I need to fix oh my god, I'm so behind. Like my whole setup for OBS just isn't right either. Like I don't have like my chat things in there. I don't know why it's not working. Although fortunately the closed caption's working, which is awesome. Didn't have to worry about that this morning, but I had to worry about everything else. Oh, got to do some stretching this morning. I was gonna go for a walk, but right as I was going for a walk, it started to sprinkle, and right now you can't hear, but it's raining out. So yeah, that didn't work. All right, if no one has anything, I will get started. today we've got some neat stuff here. I'm going to share this with you. This is from the Moneyless Society podcast. This is a interview that they have with Professor James Gilligan. He has done an incredible amount of research with criminals, people specifically who are, rapists and murderers and, kind of the, shall we say, the worst of society, and just trying to figure out why they did this. So he's done a life of research in this. He's a psychiatrist who's worked in the prison system and stuff like that. So he's got a lot of books out on this topic. Peter Joseph also quoted him on this, and I have not read his book yet, but it's one of the books that I need to read. I just need to find more time to read. Ultimately, what he kind of talks about is that with these people, they commit the crimes they do because they've been disrespected or shamed or something like that, and that is what triggers it. And when we talk about inequality in society today, especially with humanity as a globalized civilization, and we look at the United States, which has the highest levels of inequality in the world, you've got high levels of inequality, high levels of poverty, and high levels of people who are feeling ashamed of their poverty, of their iniquity, and they end up creating more violence. If you read the two books that are part of my required reading, Spirit Level and the Inner Level, they specifically talk about this sort of thing, that as inequality goes up, all the bad things go up, all the good things go down. Like, if you give them level of inequality in a city, state, or country, they can basically predict a whole bunch of things. Crime rates, incarceration rates, literacy rates, teenage pregnancy rates, and all sorts of things like that. Those two books they're very much required reading. And I expect that once I read his book, I think it's Violence, that his book will be required reading too. More or less be, Spirit Level, Inner Level, Violence by James Gilligan, and then the other ones. So it's So this is an almost 2-hour interview with James Gilligan through the Moneyless Society. Give this a listen to. I was really surprised they got someone like him. He's so important. His research is important to leftists understanding why the world is fucked up and what we do about it. So give the Moneyless Society a listen. First of all, follow them, subscribe. They have a Patreon as well, but also listen to this interview. James Gilligan and his research is super important for leftists to understand. So go do that. Go do it now. All right, so there's that. Why is things just buffering? Let me go and pause this. Okay. All right, so there is that. Move this up here. It's a great interview. Listen to it. All right, so we've talked about this before, read some articles on it, watched a video on this. Philanthropy exists to launder the reputations of the rich and serves to replace public institutions with private ones, right? In any society where charity or philanthropy exists, that is a society that has failed. If charity is needed, society has failed. If philanthropy is needed, society has failed, right? So you've made billions exploiting workers, nature, and public resources, and you've bought off the entire government to make sure you won't be taxed. But for some strange reason, people seem to think you're evil. Try giving a tiny portion of your stolen wealth to a cause that's hot right now, or start your own nonprofit to hoard your wealth the right way. Now your reputation is clean, and you've saved even more on taxes, right? This is just I found this on Facebook. It's a good little meme. I need to add this to my collection of writings on this topic. So, yeah. There's that one. Any questions or comments on this? Also, let me know how the music's doing. Discord. OBS is just kind of a mess right now. All right. we'll go into the next little meme we have here. What the heck is socialism and why do the 1% cry about it? You can't forgive loans, that's socialism! You have nothing to lose but your chains. Alright, socialism is a theory for societal evolution where the workers, aka the proletariat, own their workplace, aka the means of production. Now, in and of itself, I have a problem with this sort of a thing, but I understand it's necessity within the context of capitalism and that sort of thing. We made this, I made this, we made this, and he's got a gun. See that right here? That's awesome. Production is then planned by elected committees to meet the basic needs of all people and increase productivity in the beneficial industries. Peace, land, bread, and healthcare per the current 5-year plan to stop all the plagues killing us or whatever. Because workers' own production, increases in productivity continuously reduce the work week, which further increases productivity as workers are more happy and committed. The hours you currently work to qualify for full-time benefits, the hours you're productive, work week target for 2040. Yeah, and this is kind of the way it should be. This is the way it should be. As efficiency, technical efficiency in the workplace goes up, the amount of hours people work should go down. But that's, of course, not the way it works because the workers don't have a seat at the table. Workers don't have any say in the way the business is run, which is significantly problematic. That is something I do change in my policies. That is something that I have as either the workers have a seat at the management table, or preferably you have employee-owned businesses or co-ops. Or at worst, the default assumption should be that the business is unionized. That should be the default. All businesses should be unionized. Full stop. All right. Increased leisure time is partly spent on free education to further increase productivity and improve the constant process of societal evolution. The goal of socialism is to evolve to a point where wealth is no longer a driving force and we work to better ourselves and humanity in a moneyless and stateless society. Okay, so we're talking about the evolution from socialism into communism. Socialism is not a single policy, it's permanent work liberation from the parasite class, aka owners or bourgeoisie, who dictate an ancient capitalist ideology with their intergenerational wealth. Yeah, so it's a neat explanation, and they use the Star Trek thing here, but I don't imagine space communism. Okay, I guess I won't go into that. I do have some ideas about communism versus socialism, but I have a post on this that I have not had a chance to research. But yeah, there you go. So there's that. Okay, what order do I want to read these in? I'm just so behind. So behind. Let's see. Okay, I've already. How do I want to do this? I wanted to. I'm ahead, or I'm behind. Got all my links out, but I don't have them quite in the order that I want to go over them. All right, let's go over this one. Since this is pertinent right now. This is from The Intercept. Let me throw all these in the chat for you. And this one here. All right, here we go. This is from The Intercept, and when was this? This is from 2 days ago, so it's very recent. This is quite pertinent now because Biden is saying that if you make less than $125,000 a year, he will forgive $10,000 in student debt and $20,000 if you have Pell Grants. Which, if he can unilaterally do 10/20, he can unilaterally do all of it, which he didn't do because he needs to give people just enough to say, see, they did good things, so now we vote for Democrats. When we should all be pissed at them because they should have done that 2 years ago, and they should have wiped out all student debt, because he can. Biden can do it. Now, zero problems. He did 10,000, 20,000, he can do all of it. All right. The origin of student debt. Reagan advisor warned free college would create a dangerous educated proletariat. 1970, Roger Freeman, who also worked for Nixon, revealed the right's motivation for coming decades of attacks on higher education. And I talk about this in one of my posts on voting, right? What is my post on this topic? It's systemic suppression within America's two-party system. I specifically talk about the education attack. But yeah, I've got the confluence of three historical movements and the dumbing down of Americans. Yeah, I'll go and throw this in here in case you want to take a look at it. In this post, I also talk about how we have a two-party system in this country. It's fairly short, which is right here. So if you want to read about that and understand that, I have it there. Okay. Also, let me know about the music. Let me know how the music on my mic is sounding. The music might be too loud. I don't know. Let me know. And my mic just let me know how the sounds are, and then I can adjust them as needed. Because then we also have this. Ding! Okay. With the vociferous debate over President Jim Crow Dementia Joe Biden's announcement that the federal government will cancel a portion of outstanding student debt, it's important to understand how Americans came to owe the current cumulative total of more than $1.6 trillion for higher education. In 1970, Ronald Reagan was running for re-election as governor of California. He had won in 1966 with confrontational rhetoric towards the University of California public education system and executed confrontational policies when in office. In May 1970, Reagan had shut down all 28 UC and Cal State campuses in the midst of student protests against the Vietnam War and the U.S. bombing of Cambodia. On October 29th, less than a week before the election, his education advisor, Roger A. Freeman, spoke at a press conference to defend him. Right, and this is a large part of where it began. There was a huge movement towards gutting education, especially higher education, because of right here the protests against the Vietnam War. The U.S. military-industrial complex, the Congress cannot have an educated populace that is against U.S. militarism, the United States' global terrorism projects, because that is money for the banks, money for the U.S. military-industrial complex, that is money for the other industries that profit from the use of the U.S. military, the pharmaceutical industry, Afghanistan, right, the fossil fuel industry in Iraq and in other countries, right, the four deadly industries. So yes, they had to mount a systemic attack against our higher education system to reduce the larger order drive against U.S. militarism. Freeman's remarks were reported the next day in the San Francisco Chronicle under the headline, "Professor Sees Peril in Education." According to the Chronicle article, Freeman said, "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat." That's dynamite. We have to be selective on who we allow to go to college, right? It's a huge alarm, huge alert that conservatives can't have, and even liberals can't have, Democrats can't have, because that would go against their militarism. And that's not a good thing. If not, Freeman continued, we will have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. Freeman also said, taking a highly idiosyncratic perspective on the cause of fascism. That's what happened in Germany. I saw it happen. large number of highly trained and unemployed people. Okay, so that's only really an issue within capitalism. When you look at a resource-based economy, and especially the way I talk about it, you have a high number of, you have a highly educated populace, period. People with bachelor's, master's, doctorates, and just learning all the things. But they also have resources, especially computer-based resources, to pursue using your higher education to solve humanity's problems. The issue here within capitalism is that if you're unemployed, you don't have any means to support yourself. You have no means to support the use of your education, whereas within a resource-based economy, that's not an issue. Freeman also said, as Biden cancels some student debt, remember why the debt exists. A key Reagan advisor warned in 1970 that free college was producing. That sounds loud to me. Key Reagan advisor warned in 1970 that free college was producing the dangerously explosive dynamite of an educated proletariat, and we have to be selective from who we allow to go through higher education. Freeman was born in 1904 in Vienna, Austria, and emigrated to the United States after the rise of Hitler. An economist who became a longtime fixture in conservative politics, he served on the White House staff during both Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon administrations. In 1970, he was seconded from the Nixon administration to work on Reagan's campaign. He was also a senior fellow at Stanford's conservative Hoover Institution. In one of his books, he asked, "Can Western civilization survive what he believed to be excessive government spending on education, social security, and all the other things that support humanity, that support the plebes, the poors, the impoverished and ill-educated masses?" A core theme of Reagan's first gubernatorial campaign in 1966 was resentment toward California's public colleges, in particular UC Berkeley, with Reagan repeatedly vowing to clean up the mess there. Berkeley, then nearly free to attend for California residents, had become a national center of organization against the Vietnam War. There we go. Deep anxiety about this reached the highest levels of the U.S. government. John McCone, the head of the CIA, requested a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, to discuss communist influence at Berkeley, a situation that definitely required some corrective action. So, yeah, and there's much of this sort of a thing also going on with right about this time, Dr. King. Dr. King was assassinated after he really leaned into his anti-war sentiment, right? So right around the 60s, you've got the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Dr. King, all of which had anti-war sentiment, and then, of course, there was a significant amount of protests at the colleges all throughout the United States. And that's really what started the attacks on the education system, which we are still suffering from today. This is one of the main One of the main reasons why Republicans and Democrats are against higher education, because it creates a mass of people who tend to have anti-war sentiment, who tend to be compassionate against war, against colonialism, and that sort of a thing. They had to make sure that only, the rich people have access to it, because they're the ones who have the sociopathy required to maintain capitalism's, especially the United States' capitalistic hegemony and control of the world. All right, during the 1966 campaign, Reagan regularly communicated with the FBI about his concerns about Clark Kerr, the University of California system. Despite requests from Hoover, Kerr had not cracked down on Berkeley protesters. Within weeks of Reagan taking office, Kerr was fired. Subsequent FBI memos stated that Reagan was dedicated to the destruction of disruptive elements on California campuses. Reagan pushed to cut state funding for California public colleges, but did not reveal his ideological motivation. Rather, he said the state simply needed to save money. To cover the funding shortfall, Reagan suggested that California public colleges could charge residents tuition for the first time. This, he complained, resulted in the almost hysterical charge that this would deny educational opportunities to those of the most moderate means. This is obviously untrue. We made it plain that tuition must be accompanied by adequate loans to be paid back after graduation. Okay, so now one thing they obviously neglect in this is the return on investment for education. Let's look this up. What is return on investment? 10 to 1? So it's like 10 to 1. Whatever it is, it's a large number. So the key thing here, which they're not going to lean into, is that there's a significant return on investment in higher education, which is why you should always, it should be free, and all education, all learning should be free in this country and globally. And this is also a big deal within our prison system too, which means massive reform. But there was it's a part of that James Gilligan interview in the studies that he had done, that in prisons where they had free education, where people got degrees, there is zero recidivism. So if you allow these violent people to get education, they no longer engage in crime. And that's another reason why they don't want higher education to be accessible to everyone, because you got the for-profit prison industry, you've got, incarceration, you've got the police they need to have their, the U.S. police as another military to control the peasants, right? The success of Reagan's attacks on California public colleges inspired conservative politicians across the U.S. Nixon decried campus revolt. Spiro Agnew, his vice president, proclaimed that thanks to open admissions policies, unqualified students are being swept into college on the wave of the new socialism. Prominent conservative intellectuals also took up the charge. Privately, one worried that free education may be producing a positively dangerous class situation. True statement. By raising the expectations of working class students. Another referred to college students as a parasite feeding on the rest of society, who exhibited a failure to understand and appreciate the crucial role played by the reward-punishment structure of the market. Oh my God. The answer was to close off the parasitic option. The reward-punishment structure of the market. Oh yeah, we love that one. Right? Because the reward punishment structure rewards those who have capital and murders and impoverishes those who don't have it. So it concentrates wealth in the 1%, in the top 20%, while the other 80% or 99%, depending which way you want to go, suffer and in despair. So it's about class warfare. The reward punishment structure of the market is talking just about how the rich stay rich and in power, and we keep the poor subservient and struggling. That's what they're talking about. In practice, this meant to the National Review a system of full tuition charges supplemented by loans which students must pay out of their future income. In retrospect, this period was the clear turning point in America's policies toward higher education. For decades, there had been enthusiastic bipartisan agreement that states should fund high-quality public colleges so that their youth could receive higher education for free or nearly so. That has now vanished. In 1968, California residents paid a $300 yearly fee to attend Berkeley, the equivalent of about $2,000 now. The tuition at Berkeley is $15,000 per year, with total yearly student costs reaching almost $40,000. Oh my God, total yearly student costs reaching $40,000? Jesus Christ. That's just insane. Student debt, which had played a minor role in American life through the 1960s, increased during the Reagan administration and then shot up after the 2007 and 2009 Great Recession, as states made huge cuts to funding for their college systems. That brings us to today. Biden's actions, while positive, are merely a band-aid on a crisis 50 years in the making. In 1822, founding father James Madison wrote to a friend that the liberal appropriations made by the legislature of Kentucky for a general system of education cannot be too much applauded. Enlightened patriotism is now providing for the state a plan of education embracing every class of citizen. So, James Madison, very much for public education, which is a good thing. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance. Well, I mean, okay, let's not give the founding fathers too much praise. I mean, the Constitution is classist, racist, and misogynist at its very core, right? So we have to, take this positive thing with a with a grain of a huge bottle of salt. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, Madison explained, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Freeman and Reagan and their compatriots agreed with Madison's perspective, but wanted to prevent Americans from gaining this power. If we want to take another path, the U.S. will have to recover a vision of a well-educated populace, not as a terrible threat, but as a positive force that makes the nation better for everyone, and so should largely be paid for by all of us. Right, exactly. And it's too bad they didn't go into what the return on investment is, and I'll have to do the research on this and add this to my policy page, because that's important. This will also go into my post there on talking about the systemic suppression inherent in America's party system. I'll also put a link to this in my educational policies. All right, any questions or comments on that before we move on? Questions, comments, anybody going once? Going twice, 3 times a lady. Anybody? I know it's just me, but I have to ask. All right, let's go. We'll move on. 3 times a lady. I'll go and throw my educational policies in here, so if you want to take a look at it, you can do that as well. It is the first one. It is the most important of the of the policies. Let me write this down. Turn on. That way I can add that to my policy. Oh, let me also bring. No, that's fine. Okay, so here we go. This next one is from the Associated Press. The hell's the date on this? This is fairly recent. It's gotta be. Come on, dudes, give me a fucking date. I really hate it when they don't give me a date. Yesterday, it's right here. Hadur. Didn't look like a date, so I didn't notice it. All right, this is from yesterday, Friday. California phasing out gas vehicles in climate change fight. Okay, so here we got a picture of a car being plugged in. All right, Sacramento, California. California sets itself on a path Thursday to end the era of gas-powered cars, with air regulators adopting the world's most stringent rules for transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. The move by California Air Resource Board to have all new cars, pickup trucks, and SUVs be electric or hydrogen by 2035 is likely to reshape the U.S. auto market, which gets 10% of its sales from the nation's most populous state. But such radical transformation in what people drive will also require at least 15 times more vehicle chargers statewide, a more robust energy grid, and vehicles that people of all income levels can afford. So, as I saw my kind of extended family a few months ago, because it was my grandniece's birthday. So we went there to see the family, because we not see them in a while, because we try and stay away from everyone because of COVID. At least I try. But my whole family is conservative, and my father and my brother-in-law, we can talk politics, and he was talking, because he's a car dealer actually. I don't know, I can't remember which car dealer he works for, but he was talking about, everyone wants to push for electric cars, but we don't have the charging stations, in the, we don't have the charging station infrastructure, and we also don't have sustainable energy powering those charging stations either. Which he's right. And when I was talking to them about that, it's like, well, this is a failure of the U.S. government. The U.S. government for the last decade should have been pushing, well, they shouldn't have been pushing charging stations in cars. What they should have been pushing is geothermal energy, tidal energy, high altitude wind turbines, and power satellites for baseload sustainable power, and then pushing for mass transportation powered off sustainable energy. Okay, one moment. I'm gonna sit down. Right now I'm using my standing desk. Hold on. You can see behind the curtain. All right, that's good. Make sure the camera's looking okay. Camera's looking okay. I can aim it. Nope. Aim it up a little bit. All right. So right, the United States government could have been doing that for a very, very long time, but they haven't, and that's the big problem. That's why. Code Dancer. I take a topic here. So I'm reading an article on this talking about California forcing cars in the state to be electric by 2035. So that's what we're talking about now. I've only read one other article. This is about the origins of debt in the United States, and there's this amazing interview here with James Gilligan, who is a psychiatrist who spent a lot of years researching violence and why murderers murder, why rapists rape, and that sort of thing. And then this is amazing. It's like almost a 2-hour interview with this professor. He's widely cited in this field, so take a look at that too. But yes, California's by 2035 has to have all vehicles run on be electric. But as part of that, they're going to have to, of course, get a much larger, much more thorough charging infrastructure in there, and they're also going to want to shift to pretty much 100% sustainable energy if they can do that. Because you don't want electric cars going to charging stations and getting the electricity from gas or coal or whatever stupid shit like that. Now, I was a few months ago, I was at a birthday party for my grandniece and talking to my conservative family, and one of my family members manages a car dealership, and he was talking about everyone wants electric cars, but we don't have charging stations, and all these charging stations are powered off of fossil fuels. So where's the thing? And then we also got lithium. We have the lithium issue too, that we need a shitload of lithium, which is becoming harder and harder to get in order to power these batteries and stuff like that. So yeah, and I was just saying that this would be less of an issue if the United States over the last decade would have been dumping money. Specifically, we should be dumping money into geothermal, tidal wave, and ocean stream, high altitude wind turbines, and power satellites. Had the United States been dumping billions of dollars into this over the last decade or so, we could have a whole lot of sustainable energy, because we shouldn't be throwing money into solar and wind, because that's intermittent. That can't be used really for baseload power without batteries, which is an extra expense above and beyond just the mere creation of the sustainable energy itself. You also need storage, whereas if you use energy sources which can be used for baseload power, which means it's always on 24 hours a day, geothermal, tidal wave, ocean, right, and things like that, then it kind of reduces the overall cost of the energy source because it doesn't need batteries, which is important. So yeah, the government has been doing that for obvious reason, because the fossil fuel industry owns our politicians, it owns our government. But if they wanted to, they most definitely could. I don't know much about the study of violence. Do you know whether he believes some people are generically incapable of empathy? I like to believe. I don't know. I have not read his book. it's in my reading list, but I really want to. He doesn't really get into that. That's more of a a judgment call. But what he basically finds is he kind of talks. He also gets into stuff similar to what the two books that I require for reading is a part of my policies, which is the inner level and the spirit level, which they essentially say that inequality is what creates sociopathy and psychopathy. So high levels of inequality is the primary driver for violence and crime and that sort of thing. And that's a lot of what he talks about. He does talk about it directly, but it's more about, and they do get to it into their second book too, the inner level, that a lot of this crime is because of shame and humiliation. So if someone, like, he dissed me, therefore I killed him, that sort of thing. So it's about the fear of social ostracization, shaming, and humiliation. That's a lot of what drives crime, violence and raping and that sort of a thing. So that's what I think that's a lot of what his research goes into. I don't know if he gets specifically into the genetic incapable empathy thing. I'm sure there's some people out there that are genetically sociopaths and psychopaths, but I think that's, because now we're getting into nature versus nurture. There may be some people where the nature aspect is much higher than anything that the environment can, overcome, but I think that's going to be a very, very small minority, if there are any people where it's just genetics, you're a violent murderer. I think that's more or less something to be relegated to movies and stuff like that. And if you watch Riverdale, my daughter likes watching Riverdale, so we watch that too. So I watched that with her. It's the MAO2 gene, I think it is. Oh, gene, hold on. I think that's what that gene is, serial killer gene. That's an ongoing thing in MAO. There you go, story of serial killer genes. Yeah, so there we go. We're talking about Riverdale here. Yeah, so Betty has, and her family has it. I'll just go and throw this in here in case you want to take a look at it. Yeah, people who tend to, I think almost, I haven't really done the research on this, but a lot of people who are serial killers end up having this gene, end up being serial killers, are able to function well in society without being violent. In fact, some professionals, like surgeon, yep, benefit from being, yes, yeah, no, definitely. Sociopathy, there's the difference between sociopaths and psychopaths. Sociopaths can be high functioning and function in society quite well. Definitely. It just depends on, as you're pointing out, how that sociopathy plays out in society. Like, people who are rich and affluent, they end up becoming sociopaths in the way that, they do things that ends up destroying people's lives by, cutting paychecks so that they can make more money, by cutting on OSHA standards so that people get hurt. Much like Jeff Bezos and his Amazon in their distribution centers where people are dying of heat stroke, right? That sort of a thing plays out there. Or even getting to the point of complete and total psychopathy where you've got politicians who are beholden to the U.S. military-industrial complex and the rest of their donors, and are planning to invade other countries to destroy them, much like they've done in the Ukraine, right? They did their coup in 2014, and then using as a proxy against Russia to help take down Russia and Europe, so that the U.S. can maintain their hegemonic control of the world and capitalism, right? So that is a way that psychopathy within can manifest in people. Where sociopathy could be something similar, but generally it's an indifference to harm. Yeah. Yeah. I have a little bit about that, talking about that in here. Actually, it starts here, the tension within methods of exchange, but I do link to this post from here, The Cancer of Capitalism. I specifically talk about inequality causing sociopathy. I think the assumption that Jeff Bezos is a sociopath could be influenced by your personal views, sure, and require more evidence. Well, the fact that he's against unions and the fact that he has, his distribution centers where people are dying, and the fact that they have people they're peeing in bottles. I mean, you've got all of that evidence for Amazon that kind of proves that he's a sociopath, because those are all things that he's doing that is explicitly harming others. He makes those rules, agrees to them or whatever, knowing that that's going to cause harm to people while profiting from it. He's most assuredly a sociopath, at the very least. If you're that rich, you have to be. There's no way you can't, because levels, if you are that affluent, you are a sociopath, period. If you are conservative, you are a sociopath in some way, period. That's just the way it is. Yeah, check it out. Do it quick. Yeah, so they had someone die and on their floors, and they told everyone to get back to work. In Amazon warehouse. Yeah, here you go. Mashable, that's a good one. Oh, I'll throw that in here. So there's no moment of silence. What happened after 2 Amazon employees reportedly died within hours of each other. Amazon has been repeatedly criticized for its treatment of workers. Right, so there's a lot of this going on. You can read about this. They've had people die, and stuff like that on the job. It's a big deal, and that's how Amazon and Bezos makes their profit, maintains their profit, and ensures that we get our packages next day or 2 days or whatever it is, right? There's a cost to that level of convenience, and that cost is people peeing in peeing in bottles and not able to take breaks. There's the cost of employees dying in their warehouses because there's not enough cooling. And you see there's a whole bunch of not externalities. So yeah, there's a huge cost to sociopaths making rules like this just so that they can continue to increase their profit margins. There's a lot of stories like this out there. Yeah, union busting, firing people, all sorts of things. Bezos most assuredly is a sociopath at the very least. At the very least, you can't be rich and not be one. You can't be conservative and not be a sociopath. I guess there's another conversation about unions to be had. Sure. I'm interested in expanding and adding nuance to my union stuff. Yeah, sure. I'm torn on it. I support unions, because of all the data that shows strength of unions is required. But I do have issues where people can't be fired. It's hard to get rid of people that are within a union, and they can be greedy and stuff like that, and that requires a more healthy relationship between the business and the workers. There has to be, I don't want to say moderation, but there has to be some level of a healthy relationship between the two, because not being able to get rid of someone who's highly problematic is a huge problem. So generally I support unions. I say by default all businesses should be unionized, period. That should be the default, so that the workers have, they're able to cooperate with each other and have a seat at the table. That should be the default everywhere. And then after that, it would be better. Yes, no, exactly, 100%. There's I think there's a movement for saying that police can't be unionized or prevent them from joining the union movement or something like that. Yeah, that is a huge problem. Yep, I agree, 100%. that the police unions are a huge disease and they take up way too much money. I've got my whole post on defund the police movement. I'll throw that here. And that's pretty much what it requires. A large part of my policies are pretty much all about this. And I actually talk about this in my policies here, right? That the thing that will do the most good is increasing minimum wage, universal health care, universal education, free, daycare, free transportation, free internet, free utilities, right? Publicly owned banks, all this sort of stuff. All that stuff will do a lot more for you, give you more bang for your buck as a community than throwing money to the police. If you have to call the police, then your society has already failed, because you have a society in which conditions have created the desire for someone to commit a crime. Your society has failed. Full stop. That's kind of where I stand. And I think I talk about that there in my policies. It's been a while, but that's kind of where I stand. Yeah, police unions are a huge problem. Most definitely. Now, on this article, it is talking about California by 2035 requiring all vehicles to be electric. Okay, sure, that's, it's kind of a step, but if they were really serious about this, and if they weren't beholden to the car industry, the automotive industry, what they would be saying is that all cities have to have sustainable mass transportation. Because we don't need electric cars. We don't need charging stations. We need quality, clean, public mass transportation, free mass transportation. If they were really serious about climate change, that is what they would do. Reading about this, okay, sure, there's some good in here, but if they're not targeting mass transportation, then they're not really serious about climate change. This is still greenwashing. Janitors Union at my college protested my graduation. They specifically protested you graduating? It was a central event in my life, and they tarnished it. I asked them how much they were being paid, but they wouldn't say. I asked why they were protesting. They said, no reason, we just want to show a force to strengthen our bargaining position up and up. Right, okay, so yeah, that's one of the issues that I have too. If they're doing it just, for the political show, that's problematic. That's just something I have a problem with. Yeah, I don't like that either. And that's, anytime you get people together, especially within capitalism, that's always going to be a problem. Because when it comes to capitalism and money and people not having what they need to survive, then they become sociopaths. Like these people suffering, however much they're getting paid isn't enough or whatever, and they're willing to tarnish your graduation just to give them a better seat at the table, right? That's part of that problem of the sociopathy that evolves from inequality. Let me pull this up. Is it here? It's not here. It's here. It's in my Cancer of Capitalism post. Exactly. There's a place for them, but they can get out of hand if they lose things. Yeah, most definitely. That's my concern as well. So I have this infographic. As inequality goes up, the level of sociopathy goes up, and the level of psychopathy goes up. It's like a rubber band. The more stress you have on it, the more it shifts from sociopathy to psychopathy. Can you see it? There it is. And you can kind of see that here. When you have high levels of equity, there should be no sociopathy or psychopathy at all. And how it manifests for those who are impoverished and those who are affluent is different. How public sector unions tend to be the biggest problems. Well, all unions are going to be a problem at some time or another because of capitalism, because it's always fighting for a bigger piece of the pie. When if everyone had what they needed, then this wouldn't be a problem. This is, everything is going to be a problem within capitalism. Unions are going to be no different than any other thing. Because capitalism, monetary systems reward competition, reward exploitation, reward combat, frankly. True, it isn't necessarily, but it tends to be here on this planet. If you get to speak to your thing specifically, in the Netherlands, they have the highest level of wealth inequality in the world, because that's where capitalism started. But they also have one of the highest levels of equality in the world. So yeah, it isn't the same, but in general, that of course, the Nordic countries are the kind of the exception to the rule, but basically everywhere else it's going to be approximately the same. That as inequality goes up, that means poverty generally goes up. Rich people get richer and poor people get poorer. That's generally the way it works. There are definitely some differences, and the Nordic countries are some of those. So when you look at this, how that sociopathy or psychopathy manifests, it's different between those who are affluent and those who are, us peasants, right? It all depends upon how much, what they have control over, what they can affect. Those who are just peasants like us can only affect other people, whereas the affluent can affect businesses, which can affect entire, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, or even affect countries. War, imperialism, colonialism, exploitation, environmental damage, increasing inequality, right? Whereas us peasants, crime, violence, depression, suicide, cruelty to animals, rape, racism, murder, and so on and so forth. So how that biopsychosocial harm manifests depends on what is the scope of what you can affect, your scope of effect. And that's when you look at the books, the spirit level, the inner level, that's kind of what they talk about. That if you give them the level of inequality in a state, city, or country, they can basically predict a whole bunch of things. Poverty rates, crime rates, and suicide rates, incarceration rates, literacy rates, teenage pregnancy rates, and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of study on that sort of a thing. And in their second book, the inner level, it shifts from inequality is highly correlative to inequality is causative. High levels of income inequality, at least, cause all these bad things to happen. And another one of those things that happen is, as inequality goes up, the life expectancy also goes down. So even rich people in the United States die, 5 to 7 years earlier than people within the Nordic countries. Like the rich people in the Nordic countries live, 5, 7, 10, 11 years longer than the rich people here in the United States. So in some ways, we could make an argument to, certainly I've seen the wealth distribution charts, like 1% on the right hand side of the graph just shoots off the moon. They own like 50%. Yep. I think happiness is in enjoying what you have and not comparing to others. If you cut out the 1% and just look at the rest of the graph, the economy looks pretty good for us. It still doesn't do that. I mean, if you're still impoverished, if you still don't have a home, if you still are worried about, this isn't just about numbers. If you cut off the top 1%, the numbers might look okay, but they're not actually okay. Just getting rid of the millionaires and the billionaires in the top 1% doesn't get rid of crime, doesn't get rid of poverty, doesn't get rid of rape. Well, a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are suffering. The United States, what's the level, especially since COVID? The level of poverty rate has skyrocketed. We were like 12% poverty in this country, but it went much larger than that. Our numbers are heavily skewed because of the equation isn't quite right. We're using an equation from the 60s. So the level of inequality, the level of poverty in this country is significantly higher, especially since Trump came into office and Biden isn't doing a whole lot to help much of that. And I didn't say most people are impoverished. A lot of people are. I mean, the level of poverty is high in this country. And we have the highest level of inequality, income inequality in the developed world, which is why our crime rates are so high. Suicide, depression, all that sort of stuff is so high is because of the high level of inequality. Pretty much the solution to any problem is the absolute annihilation of inequality. And that's mostly what my policies concentrate on, the destruction of inequality. If you want to solve any problem, destroy inequality. That's pretty much the way it's going to be. So my policies very powerfully attack the inequality thing, even putting a high minimum wage and a low maximum wage as well, so that we can very powerfully control inequality within some very stringent levels. Like the lowest levels of inequality is like Japan, which is times 11, and I set my maximum wage at times 9. I think that was the lowest at one point in time. So the highest makes 9 times what the lowest makes. And then there's a 100% marginal tax rate at that maximum wage, because it is a true solid maximum. And then you increase, it's tricky to evaluate how well off everyone's doing just by looking at how much wealth everyone has, but what I'm getting at is that the problem is not inequality. The problem is inequality. It is. Plenty of studies that show that. I mean, there's so many studies, so many books that talk about this. Inequality is the problem. Eddie, how you doing? But I don't agree we should strive to absolute equality. I think we should have equality choices. Well, no, the whole issue is the outcomes can't be, there's no way for outcomes to be equal because they don't have choices. Okay, sure, right. So you want everyone to have the same opportunity, but obviously we can't force them, we can't make it so that they all graduate. We can't make them all be prodigies. Right, sure, of course not. We can't do that, but have everyone have access, the same access. Yes, that definitely. That's basically that's what my policies do. Everyone has the same access. But inequality, yes, is the problem. Plenty of studies on it. Read those 2 books in my required reading there. They'll go through it, and they even get into the evolutionary psychology of it in the 2nd book. Inequality is a problem. Now, as you were talking about earlier, Code Dancer, that can be relative. What inequality? Now, even if you have high levels of inequality, and yet I used to be more very radically liberal, but I kind of got a bit more moderate about education and healthcare. In what way? See, the problem is high suicide rates, then we should look at that. Right, and high suicide rates are caused by inequality and that is a high crime rates, suicide rates, there's plenty of studies on this, are caused by levels of inequality. Don't one person's suicide happen because someone in another state is making hundreds of times. Well, it's not. It's about the inequality in the city. I mean, it's about the culture in the country overall, but it's also how it's happening, how it is manifest there in their life, right? If they are struggling, if they are impoverished, they don't have a place to live, and then they become an alcoholic, they abuse people, right? The core driver of that is the fact that they are impoverished, that society didn't take care of them, that there was inequality. Inequality means people at the top, people at the bottom. The existence of this people at the bottom is a socioeconomic result of that inequality. Privatized education and healthcare. I'm from Europe, and I think it's a bit harsh to give children better chances in life just because parents are just... Right, and I'm very much against that. My policies end private education, period, and pretty much privatization is almost always the wrong answer. I mean, it almost always makes everything worse. We should nationalize healthcare. We should nationalize education. That's the way it should be. I kind of shifted a few years ago when I read this article on the difference between like nationalizing and Bernie's plan of single payer. There was a difference. So after that, I jumped on the nationalization bandwagon. So yeah, we need to nationalize education, healthcare, energy, banks, food supply, pharmaceuticals. We need to nationalize pretty much everything that humans rely on to exist. We should honestly, this isn't in my policies yet to nationalize the housing. I haven't quite gone that far yet, but that's in my brain. The end result is going to be that like suicide rates among people making 30,000 a year 5 times higher than people making 100,000. What matters is $30,000 a year, right? Which is inequality. It doesn't matter whether or not someone is making. Well, it does. It does actually, because you still understand that you still know that this person is making 10 million. I don't think we should. Well, because the inequality still exists, and there is still a psychological harm that's done, not just to the person who knows that this person has a private jet and I don't. That person who has a jet is also harmed. That inequality manifests at the top and at the bottom, much like we talked about earlier, right? That from this picture, that sociopathy and psychopathy happens at the top and at the bottom. So those at the top also suffer, right, and do bad things to harm others, and those at the bottom also suffer and do bad things and harm themselves and harm others. It's not just the people at the bottom who suffer, right? Although they are the ones who suffer the brunt of it. The people at the top also have brain damage, also end up being sociopaths, also end up harming others. Although it's more systemic and structural, right? The level of violence here is individual, and here at the top, those with the $10 million or whatever, because they can buy politicians, their violence, their sociopathy, their psychopathy is manifest through systemic and structural violence, which hurts more people. Like, what if 10 million a year person living on Mars or something, and what if they're purely theoretical? Well, why would we talk about anything if it's purely theoretical? I mean, how can we have a conversation about what ifs if you're not talking theoretical? Well, if a person is $10 million living on Mars and I can't, that means still I can't and I might want to. That level of, that lack of equal opportunity, right? That causes harm. As far as not letting the government do 100% of it, yeah, we can do publicly owned, not necessarily, federal government run everything, but publicly owned banks, publicly owned everything, but a lot of things, but then have, the federal government foot the bill for most of it because they pretty much have to. Especially as we get to the technological unemployment through automation and AI. At some point, the government is going to have UBI. You're going to have to do UBI so that people aren't dying in the streets because there aren't enough jobs, because so many jobs have been gotten rid of because of automation and inequality, or automation and AI. And we're seeing that a lot more when we're looking at COVID. So many more businesses are trying to automate so many things so they can get rid of that weakness of human beings getting sick. More for negative income tax? Oh, well, sure. Negative income tax is pretty much this. Well, the issue with the. Okay, yeah. The negative income tax is pretty much price of living in a capitalist oligarchy. Yes, true statement. How you doing? Welcome. Well, nationalizing a negative income tax wouldn't give you the same result. They affect things very differently, but in a sense, giving a negative income tax is similar to giving people UBI. It's just a matter of how you choose to do the math. $30,000 is the principal component. You're saying that 10 million a year causes psychological harm because they're making so much more money. I would explore that if you're up for it. A universal Anaholics fan. How you doing, man? You know what it is, you bastard. How you doing? Welcome, welcome. Well, read those two books. They go into it in depth, right here. You don't know? Yeah, you don't. I'm watching you, mister. Universal basic income. Basically giving everyone a certain amount of money every month to support their living. The spirit level here and the inner level here goes into the harms of inequality. These are really great reads. These are the same authors, and this is done in 2009. This is 2019. Really great reads, and even in the second one, they get into the evolutionary psychology and in how inequality causes harm because of our evolutionary psychology. It's a really good read when they get into it in the later half of the book, but they don't quite get to the point where they come to the right answers as I would like. But they're asking good questions here about how to solve certain things. So read these two books. If you want to know more about the harms of inequality, these two books are right here. And if you want to get into it more, The New Human Rights Movement by Peter Joseph, I would recommend every person in the developed world read this. If you're only going to read one book, read this one. So I'm not against it. I prefer right now. I prefer progressive basic income the way I implement it. But Scott Santens, who is a big proponent of it, I've got some of his articles here actually looking at that sort of a thing. Specifically looking at, making the basic income universal and just increasing the taxes on the rich, which I hesitate to do that because they can always get rid of that. But we're going to read some of his stuff possibly today, so maybe I'll convert on that. We'll see. Negative income tax is more relative to the person. Sure is. Sure. Yep. Well, it depends on how it's implemented, right? It depends on how that negative income tax is implemented. It could be. I mean, of course it is, because each person has their own income. I mean, it is relative, but how do they implement it? My camera? What's wrong with my camera? Looks okay here. Okay, I can still see myself. What happened to your camera? Well, let's look at my economic policies. Do I not look good? I mean, I don't look good, but is it worse than normal? Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I have a spreadsheet here. I thought it looked better before. No, it's the same camera. It's just the lighting might be off. I did move my lighting around, so my lighting's not perfect right now, so that's probably part of it. I have my lighting angled. Here, I'll turn it more towards me. I don't want to give you too much of a fright. No, it's a little more towards me. Is that a little better? A little more lighting? Okay, all right. Good to know. It's hard for me to tell because my picture is so small in the corner over there. Thanks, appreciate that. I think any famous person will have a lot of likers and a lot of haters. I don't think it's actually based on how a famous person acts. I think it's mostly about how people project their emotions. Oh, sure, but that's based on, the difference of inequality, right? If they're suffering or struggling, and then how much, this famous person has because of their fame, right? Got their Maserati and their Lamborghini and their $10,000 pair of pants and their diamonds and sparkling, right? And their bodyguards. Inequality has a direct biopsychosocial effect on your psychology, which of course affects the way you think about those who are more affluent than you. Now, Oh my God, Alex, yes it does. You're just trying to piss me off, aren't you? Huh? Arrgh. It does. Full stop. There's plenty of research on that. Again, read those books. I think Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos are the absolute worst human beings on the planet. Not the worst on the planet, but they are bad. I mean, they're really bad. I mean, they're bad on a lot of levels, right? I mean, they're against unions. They're racists, right? There's lots of really great reasons why they're bad human beings. And just look at the systemic and structural violence that they inflict upon the world, right? Elon Musk working to make electric cars, that's greenwashing. That doesn't actually help us, not really in the long run. Again, like I talked about earlier, if he really gave a flying fuck about humanity, he wouldn't be doing cars, he would be doing trains, electric trains, electric subways, he'd be electric buses and stuff like that. It's not socialist versus liberal economics. Well, okay, sure, to an extent, sure. A lot of it does come down to that, right? But it's even a bit beyond that, because it's not just that they're bad because they're engaging in business in such a way that makes them a lot of money and harming others. I mean, that is part of it. But it's also that if they really cared, they could be working on something that would actually save humanity from extinction, but they're not, because that's not what makes them money. And that all comes down to this, much like I share all the time, this issue with the tension within methods of exchange. It's that choice between, where is it? Did I end it? Yeah, okay, it's over here. It's that difference between doing something good for humanity and doing something that makes them more money. That's the tension within methods of exchange, which I always share all the time. Your boss earns $10 million a year. Yeah, we already talked about you, Anaholics. We fucking already talked about you, dude. He's from the Netherlands. So, like I was saying earlier, that, the Netherlands is one of those countries that is a little bit different than all the others, because they have low levels of actual poverty, but they still have one of the highest levels of wealth inequality in the developed world. So their income inequality might be high in some ways, but the bottom is not impoverished as we would think of it, right? So he's a little bit different. He's kind of proving my point here. That's because your life is doing great. They take and abuse government subsidies for their own personal gain, aka shareholders. Yep, exactly. Isn't it strange that we have self-driving cars, but we don't have self-driving trains? I think the problem is railroad unions wouldn't like. Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Code Dancer. I mean, you're pointing out the exact problem of capitalism, right? Because automation leads to people losing jobs, which means people are losing their livelihood, which is why we need UBI, right? I mean, we've got some of the shittiest trains in the developed world in this country. Why? Because the fossil fuel industry and the automotive industry doesn't want people to use trains. Because if they shift to trains and public transport and other things like that, they're losing billions of dollars. So they have a self-vested interest in making sure that trains don't become a thing, right? Most railroads are nationalized, right? They aren't here in the United States. It does not take away the incentive of startup innovations such as self-driving trains. Not necessarily. Again, you're pointing out the profit motive, right? Profit is the core driver for things. Again, the choice comes down to what will make us money, not what is better for humanity, right? That's the tension within methods of exchange. That's exactly what I talk about here. If you haven't read this, it's an easy read. It's a 9-minute read. Just take the time to read this. It's really easy. Explains pretty much everything. No people sleeping under a bridge, but it might change soon with prices changing, gas prices going through the roof. It is, however, yeah. I mean, even the Netherlands and Finland and those countries, they're part of the European Union, and they are also struggling under this. Much more so because they're part of the EU in a sense, that they don't have their own sovereign currency, so they don't have the ability to be as flexible as they would prior, to becoming part of the EU. Customers do value ecological options more and more, so there's more demand, but only if you are affluent, only if you are middle class or more can you get access to it, because it's more expensive, right? That's the racism inherent to capitalism. People who are impoverished, people of color are disproportionately cast into poverty, right? Don't have access to that. So there's entire studies on this, how capitalism is racist. It is at its very core. The people, who are poor, live in poorer communities, and that's where the trains go through, that's where the toxic dumps are, that's where the factories are, because they don't have economic and political power to fight those sorts of things. So the affluent white people can say, not in my backyard, they can NIMBY the fuck out of something, but then it gets shifted over to the impoverished inner cities who don't have power. Oh, you don't think it's right? Well, you're wrong. You're completely wrong. Everything that's happening globally is systemic and structural racism on a global scale. Capitalism is viscerally racist. It's classist. It is misogynist at its very core. What's happening with the global South, Central and South America, and India and Africa? The global North is still exploiting the global South. Well, I have the whole thing. I have a post started on this. Racism is not a consequence of governments and their policy. That systemic and structural racism does come from there. You're right. Racism as an actual thing actually started, at least here in the United States, following slavery. Slavery comes first, and then racism comes later. But then, yes, all of that racism and slavery is supported through governments and their policy. Multipolar world is coming. What does that mean? Panara Bista Africanus. What does that mean? But yes, how the global North exploits the global South is systemic and structural racism created by governments and their policy, right? How the EU deals with the global South, how the United States deals with the global South it's racist at its very core. Murdering and exploiting people of color globally for fun and corporate profit. And I talk about reparations in my policies. Go hand in hand. You can't have slavery the way it was. Incorrect. The primary drive for slavery is having bodies of work. Like they make the argument, right? Black people enslaved other black people, right? Africans enslaved other Africans. White people enslaved white people, right? So it's not, racism comes after slavery, at least here in the United States. Slavery comes first as an socioeconomic driver, and then racism comes after that. Kind of solving racism, not even close. Capitalism drives racism because what drives people to be racist or have slavery is the economics. But I don't think racism is inherently linked. Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Capitalism, you cannot get rid of racism unless you get rid of capitalism, because capitalism thrives on inequality. Not in the U.S. Well, they had indentured servants, right? They were effectively slaves. I think they were Irish or something like that. I'm not really up on that side of things, where like the whites and slaves are. I'd have to research that. But we have slavery currently with the 13th Amendment, which allows prisoners to be used basically as slaves to do work. The United States is one of the largest slave colonies in the world. By globalism and open borders trading. Oh, well, it should, Eddie, but it doesn't. It does to an extent, but it won't because of competition, right? As long as those borders exist, as long as countries are competing for resources, as long as inequality exists, as inequality increases, tribalism goes up, racism will always be a thing. As long as capitalism exists, globalism and more open borders might reduce it a little bit, but inequality and poverty will still ensure that racism is still a thing. No more unipolar world. There will be many superpower nations in the near future, proving that capitalism is the top of the dog. Okay, all right. Now, I'll give you a hesitant agreement to that. Panera Beast Africanist, yes, but more no to that. Liberal capitalism flourishes the most when everyone has access to the market, so if you deny certain races to the market, that's economically bad. No, it's not economically bad, because they can be exploited for money. I mean, like right now, people of color are impoverished in this country, disproportionately than white people. And they can't have a society where you have capitalism. Correct, you cannot. Because capitalism creates inequality. It needs inequality to exist. Therefore, racism will exist because of tribalism and the reduction of social trust. So you can still have racism. I mean, racism has, slavery has existed, right? So black people as slaves, or indigenous people as slaves, I mean, the Africans were indigenous people, whatever, right? Just having certain people as slaves doesn't destroy the economy. It increases the economy because you have more workers to do work and do it cheaper. So therefore, your bottom line will go up. How much profit you make off that is higher. Yeah, you can't. Every capitalist society will be racist, period. Racism decreased under capitalism since the 20th century. 1900s, I don't believe that. I mean, the United States is still murdering people of color globally for fun and corporate profit. I mean, look at all the black people being murdered disproportionately in the United States. Look at how we are exploiting and destroying the global South. I mean, it's racism, it's just changing form. It's becoming much more systemic and structural, much like you're seeing in the United States with the police, and then globally with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, through engaging in economic warfare versus the global South. Racism is socially constructed. Races are socially constructed and actually don't make sense. I don't think you can link that to capitalism. Yes, you can. I just explained how you can. I explained how racism at its core will exist within capitalism because there is competition, right? If you have competition, you have, culturalism, you have people from one country competing against another. Well, right, exactly, nationalism. But that nationalism exists because of capitalism, because there's competition. Without competition, if all countries of the world cooperate, sure, that would get rid of equality, assuming they go that way. That would get rid of, basically borders, and that would get rid of racism to an extent. But that won't happen under capitalism because capitalism thrives. Right here, read this. I talk about that very thing in here. Capitalism requires competition and exploitation, and therefore it's inherently sociopathic. Nationalism is a byproduct of capitalism. But why would it be necessary to divide the money between races? Well, because people between different races, right, are in different countries. And then as inequality increases, as poverty increases, so does social trust goes down, therefore classism, racism, misogyny increases, right? As inequality goes up, tribalism goes up, racism goes up. And inequality is a natural byproduct of capitalism. Points that agree with most of them. Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you agree. If you like, please feel free to follow. Think nationalism gets in the way of capitalism? Okay, that's nationalism. Yeah, so nationalism is a natural byproduct of capitalism, but yes, as a cultural thing, nationalism does lead to protectionism because of competition, right? Yeah, that is true. And that's why when we talk about, like, see memes and stuff, conversations on Facebook and Twitter, I'm very much against nationalism. Well, tell me more why you agree or why you disagree. Here, let me give you this. I can, to some degree, understand the competition, but I don't understand what the amount of pigment of your skin. Well, it has to do with classism, right? Because capitalism creates is within capitalism. Do I have that in here? Hold on. I don't have something on that. So, as inequality goes up, which is a natural thing under capitalism, right? Inequality goes up, tribalism goes up. Social trust goes down, tribalism goes up. So if tribalism goes up, people are going to naturally come together for protection within their tribes, meaning there's social status tribes, which tends to be race-based, right? Especially in the United States, white people are more affluent than people of color, because they want to make sure that they're taken care of. And when you have capitalism and inequality, conservatives always need an enemy, and the enemy is always immigrants and people of color, right? So part of that tribalism, part of that reduction in social trust as inequality goes up, results in racism because of that tribalism. Especially as as inequality goes up, conservatism becomes more powerful because people are afraid. And as they are more afraid, their brain shuts off because their emotions are in charge. Therefore, they're going to be much more influenced by immigrants are the enemy and that sort of a thing. It's something psychological, of course it is. I think that one race is superior. It's thinking, yes, without any nuance, capitalism and economy. Yeah, but you can't separate the two, because capitalism created slavery, which then required racism in order to perpetuate oppressive systemic and structural violence upon the masses. They always need groups to exploit and to murder for profit. Tribalism can be a result of poverty. Okay, yep, good. I also think you're a bit cherry picking with the USA example of capitalism. Well, look at any other developing country. I mean, that's the way it is globally. I mean, the United States is just the easiest one. I mean, you're right about that. We're the easiest one to look at because we have the highest level of inequality in the developed world, so things are much more pronounced here. As inequality goes down, the level of extremism in those examples goes down. It's just the United States is the easiest one to talk about. I live here, so that's what I concentrate on. It's true in all the other countries too. I mean, other countries have created slavery. Slavery existed. Oh, right. I didn't say Did I say capitalism created slavery? It's not. Actually, if you go back further, you're right about that, Eddie. It's actually, I've got a whole post on this that I'm in the process of writing, which will explain all that. But it's scarcity. Capitalism creates an illusion of equal opportunity. True. Requires people at the bottom of the totem pole. True. U.S. is mostly a poor country, so there's a lot of poverty. True statement. Like free prison labor. True statement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the United States has a lot of slavery in this country through the free prison labor. That's exactly right. Racism decreased in Europe under capitalist system. Well, it depends on what you mean by capitalism. For me, my definition is a little broader than that. I mean, technically capitalism started in the 1600s with the East India Trading Company or some bullshit in 1654, right? For me, it's, anything that uses money or trade, anything that uses a method of exchange. So I'm not talking necessarily technical capitalism, although that is a thing too. Again, I talk about that in here, right? The tensions within methods of exchange. This explains all of it. If you want me to get into, I can get into the how slavery became a thing. Let me bring this up. This is not something I have finished. I would define capitalism as a free market economy. What's a free market economy? There's no such thing as a free market. A free market could never exist. Not in the way that it's actually defined, because a part of what a free market is requires an educated consumer, and having an educated consumer is uncapitalistic. It's anti-competitive, because that would require 100% openness and transparency about your product and how it was made and stuff like that. And it also requires high levels of equity within the populace. Liberalism is a combination with capitalism. Liberalism is always bad. Liberalism will fill the flaws. No, liberalism, it creates the problems. So Democrats are liberal. Republicans are, Democrats are also conservative. They're center-right. The United States has no left-wing organization, no mainstream left-wing political party. Democrats are center-right. Republicans are far right, lunatic fringe. Like, someone gave this amazing metaphor, right? In Uvalde, that the shooter that went into the school, that's Republicans, right? And the people, the cops outside standing and waiting for 45 minutes, that's the Democratic Party. It's the job of the Republican Party to destroy everything. It's the job of the Democratic Party to ensure that progress does not happen. Like they say, there's the quote that says that the Democratic Party is where social movements go to die, right? I need to change what I'm sharing here. We'll go here. Okay, so here, again, this is rough. I'm not even borderline done with this, but I'll use this to explain how slavery existed. And this is this will go into explaining pretty much why we have all the problems we have in the world. Well, you have to understand what liberal is. Liberal means it's not left. It means neoliberal. Like, I'm left. Democrats aren't left. They're actually right. They're center-right. Because the U.S. politics it's all right-wing. We have no left-wing politics in this country. Liberal means neoliberal. I came into that understanding a year or two ago. Because I used to identify as liberal and progressive. Doesn't does children, and Republican solution is have one unlocked door. Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's fucking horrific what happened there. And if you actually get into, I'll go and share this again since we have more people in here. Listen to this. This is James Gilligan. He is a brilliant man who spent time he's a psychiatrist who studied a lot of violence. He specifically in prisons, psychiatrists talking to murderers and rapists and why they happened. He's got some really amazing work. This is like almost a 2-hour interview with him talking about the causes of murder and rape in society. Listen to this and follow Moneyless Society as well. They're amazing. So, okay, let's look at this. So pretty much every single problem in humanity comes down to the transition from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic Revolution. It comes from the shift from hunter-gatherer society to agrarianism, farming and herd domestication. Now, as far as we know, hunter-gatherers were egalitarian, cooperative, they were nomadic, right? Now, the reason why, and they didn't have private property, everything was shared, sexual partners in everything. So with hunter-gatherer forefathers, they had a significant amount of land for resource exploitation, and on all that land, they had a shitload of resources available for exploitation. But they also had high levels of technological efficiency with which to exploit those resources on that land, right? Because over hundreds of thousands, millions of years, they've had a high level of understanding how to hunt and what berries to eat and stuff like that. And also their individual resource needs were low because they were hunters and gatherers. They were nomadic and they traveled. So our Paleolithic hunter-gatherer ancestors lived in relative abundance because high knowledge how to exploit the resources, a lot of resources available, right? Now, when we shift to the Neolithic Revolution, agrarianism farming and herd domestication, that all changes because now they're settled, they're in one place. They have a small amount of land with which for exploitation, and within that land there's a limited amount of resources available. And of course, shifting from hunter-gatherers to farming, the efficiency with which they can. Interesting stream with some Mr. Artists. However, you didn't convince me to be leftist. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it, man. Good to see you. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and COVID-free. Appreciate the conversation. Got some interesting questions. I'm glad you're asking questions. Bye. So once our hunter-gatherers shift to farming, small amount of land, small amount of resources, and they also don't have the technology to exploit it very well. And then because they are now settled, they're living in one place, they have a much higher level of resource needs, and they don't have the technology to exploit the land to get the resources. Therefore, they're living in relative scarcity. So during that transitional period, when they go from hunter-gatherers to agrarianism, they go from relative abundance to relative scarcity. That is where everything goes wrong. That's where inequality, classism, racism, misogyny, that's where private property starts. That's where everything goes bad. Right here, in this transition. This is where slavery starts. This is where violence starts. This is where tribalism starts. This is where nation state starts. It all starts right here. Scarcity. It's abundance versus scarcity, and how humanity deals with it. This is where it all goes wrong. Right here. At some point, I'll have a blog post out on this. I'm still trying to figure out how the hell to write it. No. Actually, that's exactly right. That's exactly what someone would say. Let me bring this up here. I've got Girly Bear. How you doing, girl? I'm doing good. Got lots of people in here. A lot of great questions. Hold on, let me bring this up. So I have this. Good question, Alex. So right here, right here, I talk about that very thing right here. And I'm in the process of writing the post that will talk about this. So what it boils down to, it's not going back to hunter-gathering, but it's about creating a society with relative abundance. That's what this whole circle is going to show, right? We go from relative abundance here to relative scarcity, and that's where everything goes bad. Right now here, that gets much more worse. Inequality goes up, and we've got nation states, patriarchy, pollution wars, colonialism, money, debt system, and then we're kind of in the point where we still have all of that, but we're also at the point, this is about 20 years ago, where we have Google, Amazon, computers, automation, and AI. This is where we're beginning the era of automation, where we start getting to more, we have the potential, we're in the era of artificial scarcity, but we have the potential to have relative abundance. Now we can go into some examples of that. Yeah, it's going pretty good today. Started out really slow, but we got some people in chat, which is awesome, asking some really great questions about capitalism and racism and inequality. Our first article was, let me go ahead and share these with you, because I'm not at all prepared. Today, I shared this. This is a great interview on Monolith Society about James Gilligan. We read this one, The Origins of the War on Colleges, and we started reading this article on California shifting all their cars to electric in the state by 2035. So we go to UBI with a high enough income to have hardly any meaningful inequality. Well, to an extent, yeah, Anaholics, that's pretty much what my policies go for, right? That's like here, right? We have high levels of inequality here and artificial scarcity. Then we go here to regenerative, open source, circular economy, which is what my policies do through Interstellar New Deal. We reduce the inequality, have an open source, circular economy, recycling everything, having UBI to help compensate for technological unemployment, and yeah, reduce that inequality a shitload. Well, yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. But I have to research that more, right? What I've said before is it would be nice if the United States would start with, let's out-Nord the Nordic countries, right? Let's try and outdo Netherlands and Finland and Sweden and Norway. Let's see if we can outdo them, if we can become a better country than they are, right? That is the challenge I would like Congress to take up, not how can we appease our donors. Yeah, that's basically kind of what my policies are all about. And then once we get to Interstellar New Deal, we lower that inequality and we have that abundance, which we can have. Good luck with that? I know, right? I mean, that's exactly right. It's never going to happen. Not in this country. I mean, humanity's going extinct in the next 100 to 200 years. So, right, it's never going to happen. But if we want to change the world and have humanity survive without poverty, war, and suffering, oh my God, this is covering up everything. I got to reduce this. Hold on. Oh, okay. Let me pull this in here and let me go back to this. There we go. All right. So yeah, reduce inequality here, and then we shift to resource-based economy, where we get rid of. It's easier to migrate. It is most definitely. I mean, that's. Oh yeah, they pretty much. I mean, that's part of the climate emergency, right? That everyone in the global south, because of the predations of the global north, including Norway and Netherlands and the EU, but definitely like the United States, have been taking advantage of, looting and raping the global south, that we're going to have a lot of climate refugees coming from the global south because the United States and the global north has been looting these countries, leaving them with nothing. And they have no ability to fight or combat the harms of climate change. So everyone is going to be going north, where the temperature is lower. I mean, at some point in the next 100 or so years, the global south is going to basically be uninhabitable, and they're all going to be coming up here. The poor are going to die off and starve and be murdered by severe violent conflict, and whoever is left from that, not the poor because they don't have the money or resources to move, but the rich and the sociopaths are going to move from the global south to the global north, while everyone in the global south dies and suffers. Fires and floods and all sorts of other horrors. I mean, it's only easier for those who are affluent to move than it is to save humanity from extinction. Is he still doing that? I thought that was stopped because I thought the indigenous population, well, actually no, they won their court case, but then it started on fire. That's what it is. So is he still doing that? That fucking douchebag. Yeah, humanity is fucked. We are beyond fucked. Beyond fucked. So yeah, we shift to resource-based economy, get rid of money, have an egalitarian, cooperative, peaceful society, which is driven by maximizing humanity's ability to manifest itself, while also working towards maximizing the quality and value of our ecology. Elections in October. Oh, okay. So that's coming up soon. Well, if there is a election, hopefully there'll be a real election, not just a sham election as most dictators have. I can link capitalism to the migration issue. Yeah, I already have. Capitalism creates systemic and structural racism. The policies of the EU and the United States engages in systemic and structural racism in their policy. Yep, that has all created climate change, and then the exploitation of the global south means they don't have the money or resources to, deal with climate change themselves or to provide for their people. Therefore, they go to the north. It's a values sickness, and that's what I talk about in here. All right, the tension within methods of exchange creates competition, exploitation, inequality. You kind of see that here, that there's within capitalism, there is this conflict, or there's this choice between benefiting yourself or your tribe, or benefiting society or the natural world. The last U.S. election, we don't really have elections, I guess. We don't have democracy in this country. I mean, we don't have any real choice. It's one corporate whore or another. I guess, you know, it's no, the people of this country and the people of the world did not win. How about that? The 99% or the 1% won, as they always do. And I talk about that in here. Lesser of two evils voting is antithetical to democracy. This is how I feel about this in every election. Well, I actually have a post on how my inauguration would go. Let me throw this up. Here it is. So this is how I feel about it. Oh, and the technical way it was performed. I talk about that a little bit in here. I mean, the election itself, not the inauguration. Yeah, I mean, there's always problems with it. I mean, there's significant problems with it. There's very little actual democracy in this country. I mean, we've never, as a country, we have never been a democracy. I'm not even talking about the technical difference between we're a constitutional republic or a, representative democracy or whatever. Choose between the two lesser two evils. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, every election is stolen from the people because we don't have any choice. It's always the approved one. Yes, both parties. Well, they're not the same, but there's a difference. Not much, but there is. Because, like I said, the Republicans are there to destroy all progress, and Democrats are there to prevent it. I mean, there is a difference. It's not much, but there is a difference. Both are conservative. Both serve the 1%. True. But yeah, every election is stolen from the people because we never actually have a real choice. We've never had a choice of the people. Like lately, in the last few years, the Democratic Party has fought like hell to keep Green Party. Yes, it was exactly. Their logos. That's the difference. Okay, fair. Yeah, I don't think it was stolen from Trump. I don't think it was at all. I mean, the Democratic Party is fighting like hell over the last few years to keep the Green Party off the ballot. I think recently someone just won a lawsuit to get on the ballot. I think in Virginia or South Carolina or something like that. Someone won against the Democratic Party to get on. I think for senator, something like that. Yeah, all elections are stolen from the people because we have no choice. No choices at all. All right. Yes. Yeah, Democrats are bad. Republicans are worse. That's why I voted for Green Party since 2016. Yeah, I voted for the first time in 2008, and then 2012 I found out about the Green Party, and then 2016 was the first time I voted Green. I'll basically continue voting Green until we actually have someone in the general election that's worth voting for. Like if Bernie was in the general, I would have voted for him. Most definitely, but yeah, the Democrats are never ever going to allow an actual, someone who could actually do well for the people in power. Because what he will do, the things he would do wouldn't necessarily hurt the 1% or the corporations, but he would mitigate some of their power, definitely some of their money by increasing taxes and stuff like that. But yeah, they can't have that. Why? It's easier to keep him out of power than to have any reduction in their stock portfolio. It's cheaper. The return on investment is significantly higher. I mean, with Corona, a lot of people voted by mail here, and there were multiple election days, which means ballots cannot be checked all the way. Okay, sure, definitely. I mean, the fact that we can't trust a completely computerized process, at least now, until it's all open source. Yeah, there was a lot of vote by mail, but some places, of course, they were prevented from voting by mail because Trump. Right, a lot of things were in a hurry, most definitely. Yeah. The United States has a lot of problems with their voting system. I mean, a shitload wrong with it. We'd have to really shift to a method of voting that was blockchain based. I think then we could do it. I know there's a few organizations out there that do blockchain based voting that we could look into. That way you could verify your vote and check if anything was changed. It's not impossible to hack a blockchain voting, but it can be done, but it's very hard. And that's something that can be detected. So a blockchain-based digital voting system is definitely something that we should look into. It'll help to reduce this a bit. But even that I'm torn on, because I have a degree in programming, so I know there's definitely ways you can you can hack computers. I mean, all that matters is, at the very end, he's one of the only politicians that has a solid track record of standing on the same policies. For the most part, he does, yeah. I mean, since he's conceded to the Democratic Party in this last election, he's gotten a little more washy on things. But you're right. Historically, he's been very solid. This is not necessarily. This is not necessary. There was a very good system. There was a very good system. What is that good system? Paper ballots. What's the good system? What you got, Analogs? What you got? Counting horse heads? The 3/5 compromise? What's a good system? Voting booth, the paper ballots, and card. Yeah, well, the problem with that is you can still stuff the ballot box. A lot of fence sitting. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, that's my issue too. Like, wasn't it Stalin who said it's not who votes that matter, but who counts the votes that does? And that's even we have that same problem here currently, counting paper ballots, right? I mean, we have that here in the United States. There's paper, people are counting, people in the county clerk offices are counting paper ballots, but there's still fraud going on in there. So and there's a lot of people worship the go back to paper ballots, have the paper trail thing. That doesn't really solve everything. It can't be checked all the way unless they destroy it, unless they destroy the papers, which is what they've done. That's why in my policies I say you have to keep all of the ballots until after, like 6 months following the conclusion of the election to make sure they can be verified, but they generally will destroy them so they can't be checked. I would give a Marxist socialist society a shot. Sure, I'd be willing to give that a shot. The voting can be checked out. Right. It can be again, but if they don't, unless they destroy it. They make people stand in line. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Yep, exactly. That's one of the ways that they engage in systemic and structural racism and classism. They close down polling places. They require IDs and they require all sorts of things to stand in the way as a form of poll tax to get to vote. Election days aren't holidays. So some people can't or won't vote because they'll get fired and stuff like that. And that's much more of an issue when they close down polling places and they have to drive an hour to go vote. Yeah, there's lots of problems, especially in this country, with voting. There is no democracy without a highly educated populace. There are ways. See, the issue comes when you get people who are really old or are in poverty. Like, there are cases where this guy is so old he can't get a birth certificate because the place where the paper birth certificate was burned down. And then you've got people who are disabled, maybe bedridden or in a in a wheelchair, and they just don't have the money because the eugenics involved with American economic policy, and giving people on Social Security not enough money to even live off of, right? Basically murdering them. They don't have the money to go get an ID. They have to travel a whole bunch, especially when they also closing down the DMVs, the Department of Motor Vehicles, where you get the IDs, and you have to travel an hour, and they don't have the money to do it. If the U.S. government, the local governments are going to fund the getting of IDs, fund the research to get, that 99-year-old person their ID, and somehow get a hold of a birth certificate that can be used, okay, sure, but that would have to be 100% funded by the government. If you did that, then okay, sure, but that's not going to happen. Just like we're seeing here in the United States, right? Closing down polling places, closing down the DMVs where you can get your licenses, and all sorts of other barriers are put in the way of people being able to vote. How do you do it without an idea? Right. So you can show mail that has your name on it, or like a credit card statement or utility bill statement or something like that. Those are some ways that they accept in lieu of an ID. Oh my God. Yeah, bills, credit card statements, that's the sort of things that they have accepted. But if they had nationalized and all the governments pay for the IDs, then I wouldn't have a problem with people with IDs requiring IDs. But that's not the way it is. Definitely not in this country. Other countries, Netherlands, where they have high levels of equity and social support, sure, I could definitely see that. Definitely see that. But not here in the United States, but a mail does not show a picture. Right, it does not. That's exactly right. And you're right, there are ways of, just putting a random name on there, signing up for something and getting it, paying for it. Right, sure, there's way of fraud engaging there, which is definitely not my preference. But in this country, as long as the government isn't paying for the, 100% for every single person to get an ID, there has to be other ways of doing it. So fraud is possible, but every single study that's been done in this country shows the amount of actual fraud. Yeah, it shows your signature, but even that, you can sign 10 different names, and they don't actually look at it either. You get 10 different pieces of mail with a signature, signing it different ways, and then you've got a whole bunch of different votes. Yeah, that is a problem, and I have a problem with it, but there's no other way around it until we have equity in this country, until we decrease inequality, until the government is willing to fund and pay for every single person to get an ID. I just go to a poor neighborhood and I would pay for a valid voting thing. Well, you have to have money to do that. I would go to a neighborhood and I would pay for a valid. Oh, pay to vote for someone else? Sure, you can do that. That's possible. But again, that comes down to inequality, right? They'd rather have money than vote because voting doesn't do jack shit for them. Whereas you give them money, you go vote the way you want. Hey, that poor person just got poorer. Of course it's not fair. But in this country, there isn't much else we can do because the government is not ever going to do the right thing. Not ever, ever, ever. Because if there was actually democracy in this country, the 1%, the top 20% would lose a shitload of money, a shitload of power, and it would be given to the people. And that's just not ever going to happen. Not in this country. Nope. Ecocide or bust. That is what they're going for. The end of humanity as a civilization. Just so they can make profit. Trump voted by mail? That's hilarious. That's funny. Yeah, he was very much against it. You do, for the most part, but there are other ways you can vote. I don't know what the requirements are to vote, but you don't necessarily have to have an ID. There are other things you can show. Like I said, you could have mail, utility that shows your name on it or something like that. There's other ways. I'm not sure exactly what those are. But that's why when you see conservatives trying to push a voter ID law, that leftists get up about it because it's highly problematic for much of the reasons that I've been talking about. People that are old enough that, the only place that had record of their birth certificate has burned down. People that are bedridden, impoverished, don't have the money to go actually get it because all the places where they can get their IDs are closed down or they're super far away, right? There's lots of things that stand in the way of people who are struggling under the horrific levels of inequality in this country to get an ID so that they can vote. It's effectively a poll tax. Requiring an ID, at least here in this country, is a poll tax. Because they have to pay for it, they have to go jump through a bunch of hoops in order to get it. Again, if it was free, and if the government paid for, you to come out there and paid to get that, that really old person to get a birth certificate figured out, then yeah, we could have a different conversation about it. But that's not the way it is. If you simply require for people to have an ID, then it's equal, right? No, it's not. Like I told you how it's not equal. As long as inequality exists, democracy cannot exist. Period. As long as you do not have a highly educated populace, you do not have democracy. Should your neighboring voting location, someone in your neighborhood can vouch for who you are. Okay, that could be something too, sure. Is that something you can do in your area? I haven't really researched this that much. I probably should. That might be, and honestly, that might be equality, but it's not equity. If the same rule applies to everyone, okay, that might be equal, but it's not equity because of differing socioeconomic circumstances. Again, it's a poll tax, in this country at least. You have high levels of inequality, poverty, low levels of education. This country has never, ever had a democracy. Never, ever, never, ever. At its core, I read it when I was reading. Oh, okay, poll watchers. Okay, cool. That's good to know. But of course, there's always issues with that too. But yeah. That our foundation as a country, our Constitution, is written classist, racist, and misogynist. And people had to fight and die for the right to vote over 100 years, over the entire time that we've been a country. People of color, non-landowning white males, women, the Chinese, the First Peoples, they all had to fight and die to get the right to vote. And still, people of color, disproportionately cast into poverty, are still having problems voting. I mean, none of the impoverished peoples, none of the people of color have anyone in office that represents them, definitely not at the federal level. I mean, we have, without actual choices to vote for, there is no, if you always need an ID, then everybody needs to have it. So it's economically unfair for poor people that everybody can. Well, not everyone can vote if poor people can't have it, right? China is about to end poverty. Yep, I've seen some stuff on that. That's good. Just because it applies to everyone equally doesn't mean that it's equity. Equal is everyone gets the same. Equity, everyone has the same outcomes. And human rights, right? Yep. That's part of the housing, education, water, healthcare. What is healthcare, education? Yeah, and a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Everybody has to have it, then you can't say I don't have it. No, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. Everybody has to have it in order to vote, but if you don't have it, the Chinese about to end human rights. Oh, well, I mean, the United States doesn't have human rights either. The United States is one of the largest purveyor of human rights violations in the entire world, because we are the largest terrorist organization in the world. Just because everybody is required to have an ID doesn't mean everyone has an ID. Those are not the same. Those are not the same things. If people of color don't have access to get an ID, that means they can't vote. Just because you require an ID to vote doesn't automatically create. Well, it creates. It's not equal. The affluent, the privileged few, the privileged bunch of people get to vote. Those who are impoverished and suffering don't. Yeah, they're both bad in their own way. China's bad, the United States is super bad, Russia's bad. Every single capitalist country is bad. China doesn't depend on imperialism, colonialism. They do that in Africa, though. We read one article, I think last year, talking about colonialism in Africa. So they are doing that a bit in there. And as long as there's profit to be made, every single country is going to be bad in one form or another. Some will just be worse than others. If I go on the street, then every policeman or woman can ask me for my ID. So if I don't show one, I get a ticket. Well, yeah, but that doesn't automatically, you get a ticket, you can't pay it, you go to jail, you get out, and then you don't have an ID. Because we have debtor's prison, right, in this country. So if you're poor, you go to jail. That's an example. This is a perfect example of it. You don't have an ID, right? You can't afford it. You can't get it, so you go to jail. Debtor's prison. China's authoritarian. Yep. Yeah, well, the United States is authoritarian too. And the polling place is 2 hours away. It doesn't matter if you have an idea. Yeah, if you can't get time off of work, right? Oh yeah. All the impediments put in the way of people to vote. Especially in southern states and conservative states where they close down polling places, they close down the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, where you can get your IDs, right? They limit the amount of time that they're open so that it's during the day where people are working, so that it's harder to get to. Oh yeah. There's lots of systemic and structural violence in this country that ensures that impoverished people don't have a choice to vote. If you're not highly educated and you don't understand the issues, it's also harder to have to know who to vote for as well. A lot of people vote out of fear. I talk about that in one of my posts, right? The lesser two evils voting is antithetical to democracy. Governments are always bad and have the risks to do bad things, which is why they need to be small. That is incorrect. That is incorrect. Most governments are bad because capitalism is what runs things, right? Yes, definitely. Small government, the Nordic states specifically show you that you're wrong about small government. Now, larger government is generally the better answer. Nationalize healthcare, debt-locking, and loan sharking Africa to help rebuild it is due to having Western influences pillaging their wealth. Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely. Yeah, the United States in the global north looting the global south. Exactly. Yep. And China's doing that to them as well. There is a voting station on almost every street corner. I have never had to wait. Well, good for you, Anaholics. As I've said before, you live in a position of extreme privilege. You're in Netherlands, one of the most equal countries in the world, some of the highest levels of social support in the entire world. Good for you, but that's not the way it is in this country. It's not the way it is in here. So many people, especially in conservative states in this country, again, close down DMVs, close down polling stations, and gut education, gut minimum wage. I mean, they don't make voting a holiday. I mean, they put so many things in the way of people to vote that a lot of people don't vote. I mean, the largest voting bloc in this country is people who don't vote. Fully 40% of the population, 40% of the population doesn't vote during presidential elections, and 60% don't vote in midterm elections. I mean, if the non-voters actually had the ability to vote and did vote, they would be the largest voting bloc in the country. But they don't. No. Good question. Are you obligated to vote in the Netherlands? There aren't too many countries that require it. I'm torn on that as a policy. It would be good if everyone voted, but I guess I would rather lean on creating policies so that every single impediment to someone voting and to there being democracy, you're obligated to vote? Okay, interesting, cool. What's the fine if you don't? I would rather just set up the policies to get rid of everything that could possibly stand in your way. Hell, if you pay someone to vote, that might be going too much. Yeah, but yeah. Voting's only good if you have enough knowledge of politics. Right, that's exactly right. That's why I say that democracy cannot exist without a highly educated populace, right? 50 to 150 years, okay, it's not huge, but it's annoying. Gotcha. Yeah, democracy doesn't exist without a highly educated populace, which cannot exist without low levels of inequality, which is very difficult to find as long as monetary systems exist. Now, Netherlands and Finland, Norway, Sweden, the Nordic countries, it is voluntary. I prefer voting obligation like Belgium. Okay. Oh, why would you prefer it to be required? We're probably going to abolish the obligation. Okay, interesting. What are the arguments against it? I'm torn on this. I like the requirement. I just looked it up and we had 78% of voters showed up. Nice. It's not enough though. Need more people. For county elections, obligation is already gone. Oh, okay. Yeah, I talked about this earlier. Did we cover an article? I think we read an article on that, didn't we? Okay, we talked about it when talking about this. People should have the right to not vote. Okay, that's fair. So, President Biden has the power to unilaterally cancel $10,000 or $20,000 if you have Pell Grants of student debt. He also has the power to get rid of all student debt. $10,000 of student debt now, after 2 years, interest is still compiling on that amount. So the amount of interest that has been grown from there, it really doesn't do much. If you really care, if he was really a good person, you're new here. How you doing? If Biden really was a good person, he would have gotten rid of student debt day one, which is something that he said. I think he said he was going to do. So $10,000 doesn't do much. Some people have over $100,000 in debt. I've got $36,000 in debt. So $10,000, sure, it's something, but he has the power to do more, and he chose not to. That's really what the conversation has to be about. Sure, you did 10,000, yay! But yeah, there's a freeze on it. There was a freeze on payments and interest. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, sure. And I think they just extended it to the end of this year too. I think I just read. Okay, all right, that's fair. But they say I owe them $103,000. Jesus Christ. Yikes. Yeah. So he should have gotten rid of all of it, but he's not doing it because he wants to. He's had the power the whole time. You didn't get a degree? Jesus Christ. Yikes. Yikes. Every single Democratic president has had the power to unilaterally end all college debt, but none of them have. The only reason Biden is doing it is because midterms are going up. 10 grand isn't anything. It's not. The only people who have 10 grand left are people who have been able to pay on it for a very long time. And that's not people of color. The biggest party profit the most, but they simply are not counted. Biggest party profit. It's just compounded since I left school. They tacked on 7,000 to the 20,000 about. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So 10,000, sure, whoop-de-doo, but he should have gotten rid of all of it. But he won't, because that's not what his corporate owners want, right? Yeah, should have gotten rid of it. He's a shitty human being. He's a war criminal, just like Obama is. He should be in jail for war crimes. All U.S. presidents should be in jail for war crimes. All of them. Every single one of them. Every single one of them have perpetuated the U.S.'s imperialistic, capitalistic hegemony over the world. Good conversations today. So what we should concentrate is because student loans are bound into asset-backed securities. Yeah, yep, and they're traded between, that's definitely part of it. Yeah, there's profit in it. That's why it's not going to go away without a fight. It's going to require one hell of a president that actually, cares about the country. Yeah, the rich make money off. Yeah, as long as it's still there, the interest still accrues, and they still make lots of money. Yep, my loan just got traded to another company. It's Mohela. Just got that in the mail this week out of Chesterfield, Missouri. Yeah, interest is where the money's at. Yeah, the U.S. government could just pay for all of it. That's why they could give away PPP loans, but not student loans. Yep. How much cost a year, University of Netherlands? Oh, it's free, actually, as far as I understand. Plus, I think Finland is the one that pays a stipend for people to go. I'm not sure, though. Yeah, really, you're exactly right. PPP loans, it can be forgiven because it's just a free giveaway to the 1%, the top 20%. 2,000 euro, is that per semester, like per year? Or is that for the whole, like a whole 4-year degree? Per year, okay. That's not so bad. I mean, it's 8,000 for a bachelor's, or unless you guys do it in 3 years, which some European countries do. That's reasonable, at least. You can work and pay that off. Oh, of course not, because, yeah, they wouldn't tell you that because they don't, they can't make their money if they do that. In Belgium, it's about 900 euros per year. That's all right. Cool. I think I paid roughly half when I studied, but inflation. Okay. Yeah, I went to a private college. I paid 12 a year for 3 years. I had 36,000 loans. I still have, I think, just over 30,000 left. And the privilege that my parents funded it. Ah, good for you. You lucky bastard. You lucky bastard. I didn't have that. Actually, when I was in the military, I had the GI Bill, but when I got $12, that's awesome. When I went to the military, I had the GI Bill, but I got married and got divorced, and then we had a lot of financial issues. She was committing check fraud and forgery, so I had like $20,000 in bills to pay. So pretty much all the money that would have gone to me paying off my college went to paying off creditors from my previous wife's fun spending. Otherwise, my loan would be much smaller than it is. We had 2 kids and was on welfare, couldn't afford it. Yeah. And my family, we've been middle class my whole life, but my parents didn't have the money to fund that either. Which I've been lucky in a position of privilege just to be middle class. So you had to work very hard. I did, and I still don't have it paid off. Not even close. Cost of studying in the U.S. seems really cool. It should. I mean, it's expensive as hell. I mean, for me, I had to go into I went into the military. I mean, I had to risk my life and to participate in the murdering of innocent people globally just to go to college. Right? Yeah, if you want to read more about this, read this. This article starts with how that came to be in the United States. I will most likely add this link to my policy page on it. Yeah, the United States is such high levels of inequality, it's just ridiculous. It's just amazing how fucked things are here. It's unreal, but we're so used to it. We're so inured to the horrors of it because we're used to the pain and the agony and the suffering because that's just the way it is here. And we don't have power. We don't have the ability to change anything, so people are just, deadened and numbed to the horrors. Is obligated for every man? Yep. A lot of countries do that. Well, currently, where I stand with that, if I was, young enough for that, I would be a conscientious objector. And honestly, every single person in the country needs to be a conscientious objector. I got the privilege of not having to go in the military. Yeah, you had yours paid for and didn't have to go in the military. Yeah, definitely. That's very good. It makes a very good army. Well, yeah, if it's funded by nationalism, right? Patriotism, yeah, it can, most definitely. But the existence of an army just, exemplifies why capitalism is bad. That competition requires military power in order to protect itself instead of cooperating. That's military. We cannot have change until the people stop going into the military and until the people in the military stand down and stand with the people. Yeah, in this country, generally smart people don't go into the military. Unless you go into the officer corps. But still. Need to get rid of, I say we need to cut the US military by spending by 75%. And all that needs to be shifted into sustainable energy and climate change fighting the war on climate change. Oh, we covered this article. Let me go and throw this article in here. It's read this article last week. Yeah, there should be a European army, instead of the US policing everything, there should be a national army, national military to prevent, humanitarian issues and all that sort of stuff. Where is it? Let me throw this in here. Here we go. So here's a study done by Stanford. It's our Job Corps. The civilian, the Peace Corps? It's our Job Corps. What are you referring to? So there's this study. It says that if we spent $62 trillion, we would make that money back and shifting to sustainable energy in 6 years. That's true. You're not. You're not one nation. But yeah, that's the kind of the issue, the nationalism issue. Need more defensemen. Yeah, I agree. And like NATO is problematic. The UN military, everything I've heard about that, it's fucking problematic. There's so much horrors inflicted by both. Somehow we need a much more neutral. It'll cost less and we can stand a chance against aggressive states if it comes to it. Okay, fair. Yeah, it's easier to fight against them when you're cooperating together. Don't have Job Corps, so military jobs. Oh, right, yeah. There was talk of a civilian conservation corps, I think. Biden was talking about that, or someone was talking about that. I mean, wasn't gonna do anything about it, but yeah, a civilian like a federal jobs guarantee, right? Using a federal jobs guarantee to power a civilian conservation corps to engage in dealing with fighting climate change and sustainable energy and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's very much. Do I talk about that in my policies? I don't know if I do talk about that. Federal jobs guarantee. I don't talk about that directly, like a civilian conservation corps, but that's basically what we're talking about here. Using the federal jobs guarantee and jobs retraining, sustainable energy, and so on and so forth. Yeah, exactly. We don't have that. Yeah, if we had that, a lot of people wouldn't be going to the military. That's exactly right. Fight for my own country, but not for some other country. See, that's fundamentally the problem. It's your nationalism which prevents us from cooperating and working with other people. These national boundaries makes people sociopathic because you're not willing to fight for other people. Like Bernie was saying, how much are you willing to fight for someone you don't know, or for someone who's not a part of your tribe? That's the question there. How erect if there would be war in my country? Yeah, I know. It's hard to even know because it's such a horrible thing to even think of. You feel more European than I feel Belgian? Okay, that makes sense. Orban would like to have you fight for him. Right, and I don't know who Orban is, but that's really what it comes down to, right? If you blindly belong to the military and blindly fight for whoever is in charge, that's a problem. People who are in the military need to fight for things that matter. Fight for human rights. Fight for food, sustainable energy, and so on and so forth. That's the issue with having kind of a large-scale military and anyone at the top to command it. He's the president of Hungary. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of corrupt dictators out there. I'd be a conscientious objector, I think. Well, actually, it depends. If there's a war in my country, inside it, we're talking civil war? Is that what you're talking about? Or war coming to my country? Right, I'll fight for any oppressed group from a nation. Yeah, there you go. That's what I'd rather say. Exactly. Very well said. Panera Beast Africanist. Well said. I never have known war. Good for you. I'm scared of the Russian invasion, though. Yeah, it's pretty horrible. The United States started it. It didn't have to happen. None of it had to happen. The U.S.'s coup in, 2014? That's when it all started. None of these people in the Ukraine needed to be murdered or have their lives destroyed, but the United States had to have their proxy war. But probably not. They probably won't invade Belgium, but you don't know. They're pretty expansionist, especially under Putin. NATO invade Belgium before Russia? Well, only if you have resources that the United States needs. Just say the word oil, the United States will be there, engaging in a proxy war with you. People who are in power say that a certain group is oppressed, then that does not mean they are. Right, they just... You have to make sure you check your sources. Just because the mainstream media supports whoever's in power doesn't mean that what they're saying is truth. They're just creating a, they're manufacturing consent for military action. Yep. Manufacturing consent. That's what the mainstream media is doing here in this country. Always support the war because that's where the money is at. Do you guys hear the music okay? At all? I don't think you guys do hear it. You can hear it very well? Is it too high? Too low? I don't follow or listen to people in power. I follow facts and evidence. Yeah, that's pretty much what you have to come down to. You have to do the research yourself. They follow. Well, yeah, that is true. That's 100% true, right? Which facts? Oh, right. The people in power will follow what they're paid to do. Yeah, and that's kind of the issue between conservatives and liberals and leftists. It's the facts that they listen to. It's the things that they allow themselves to be persuaded by. Problem if you would have an EU army, then those people in power decide if I have to fight or not. Yep, that's true. But that's the way it is in every single country. And that's why, as long as monetary systems exist, the militaries will always support those in power. They will always support profit. Military will always, in one form or another, be used to support the current regime. It won't ever really be used to support the people. Yep, it's not a country, that's right. EU still has unanimity in voting, though. So, what does that mean? They vote. Well, they vote as a bloc for things regarding, like EU decisions, right? But they still have their own national elections and stuff like that. Oh, right. Unanimity. You mean... Explain what you mean, Eddie, Wally, with respect to the EU. I'm not really familiar with it. But right, you can't vote in a different country's elections. You can only vote in your country's elections. Is unanimity majority? Majority of people in all the EU countries? 60%, 70%, 90%? Pan-Arabist. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pan-Arabist Africanist. Okay, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. I was saying Panera, like Panera Bread. We have a store, a food place in the United States called Panera Breads. So that's where my head was going. Panera-bist. Okay, Pan-Arabist Africanist. Thank you so much for correcting me. Oh, do you have a shortened form that you typically go by? Pan or Africanist? Well, say there's a law to vote about something very sensitive, then every single country has to say yes to that if one country disagrees. So you're talking specifically about things with that are sensitive within the EU as an organization, right? You've been there before? Okay, all right, good. So you know what my issue is. Gotcha. Good. I'm glad you understand. Thank you for the correction. Yeah. So each country has delegates or people representing their country within the EU, and then they vote on these sensitive issues that will affect everyone in the EU, because the European Union itself is an economic organization, right? That can make laws that affect everyone within the European Union. So, but what is how do they have to vote? Is it a majority wins, or is it 60%, 70%, of the delegates from that country have to agree? This is my policy site here. It's like 200 pages, over 200 pages of policies, and this is my blog here. Been blogging about politics for a decade. Yeah, so you need some light reading. By unanimity, you mean 100% agreement? Is that what you mean? Define unanimity. That's why I'm asking what percentage, because I don't know what you mean by unanimity in this circumstance. Everyone wins? Everyone votes? Okay, they all have to agree. So 100%, everyone has to vote for 100% yes, right? 100%, okay, all right, thank you, all right, gotcha, all right. Interesting. Can you give me an example of something that they voted on for that? So I can put my brain around it a little bit. Every country has veto. Okay. Oh yeah, so it's basically consensus-based democratic principles. Anyone can veto it. They either all have to agree or nothing happens. There's a lot of that going around in Europe, which is good. That's something I've been liking. EU countries voted for an EU constitution. It did not make it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, so constitution would then affect every EU member. Huh, interesting. Russian embargo. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I heard that. Yeah, okay. All right, that makes sense. Thanks for the example. I appreciate that. Does every country have access to, does every country have their own central bank and can make their own economic policies regarding the EU within their country? Make their own policies regarding the euro within their country? Or is any policy about the euro really can only be made by the EU itself as an organization? It's going to be a bigger Russian embargo, but Hungary didn't agree. The Orban walked out. Gotcha. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. There was one central EU bank. Gotcha. That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to make sure. European Central Bank. Okay, all right. Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Educating me. Very, very interesting. All right, I have 10 minutes left, 9 minutes left. Let's finish reading this so I can complete this article, so I don't have to leave anybody hanging on this. I'll go ahead and share it again. This is about California saying all vehicles must be electric by 2035, which is too late. But let's go ahead and finish this. As I said earlier, that instead of electric vehicles, they should be requiring public transportation in California, and public transportation, subways, trains, buses, all electrically driven or something like that. So it's a step forward, but it's not what needs to be done. All right. But such a radical transformation in what people drive will also require at least 15 times more vehicle chargers statewide, more robust energy grid, and vehicles that people of all income levels can afford. Now, again, if you don't concentrate on vehicles but concentrate on public transportation, that would alleviate that. It's more efficient. It's just the answer that needs to be done instead of fucking cars. It's going to be very hard getting up to 100%, said Daniel Sperling, a board member and founding director of the Institute of Transportation Studies at the University of California, Davis. You can't just wave your wand. You can't just adopt a regulation. People actually have to buy them and use them. That is true. And you definitely have to put in the policies to help make that a thing. They have to have a plan so that can do it. And I talk about that sort of thing in my policies too. Like I would say in this sort of instance, what are 22? Okay, this would work. So every company that shall sell cars in California would have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift all of their cars that they sell in California to electric. And they will also, within that time, have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift all of their existing ICE engines for all their cars in the country, in the state, to electric as well. So that's what I would say that they would have to do. So each company would have to figure it out. Would a lot of them pull out? Yeah, a lot of them would pull out. But those that wanted to, those who are already shifting to electric by like 2030, they're not going to have an issue with it. They're going to be ahead, and they're going to be able to corner the market in California. So they'll in a sense be rewarded by pursuing a sustainable energy option for their cars. 2 years ago, Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom told state regulators 2 years ago to adopt a ban on gas-powered cars by 2035. One piece of California's aggressive suite of policies designed to reduce pollution and fight climate change. If the policy works as designed, California would cut emissions from vehicles in half by 2040. Yeah, and that's not enough. Not enough. Cut vehicle emissions in half by 2040. That's not enough. I mean, honestly, yeah, they need to have all their cars transition to electric by 2030, and no gas-powered cars sold by 2030. And they also have to have public transportation powered by sustainable energy by 2030. 100%, no, none of it. And this is something that California itself might not be able to do, but if they had the backing and the funding of the United States, much like that article I shared earlier, here, no miracle tech needed, how to switch to renewable energies now and lower costs doing it. If the US government was behind on this, they could fund the transition for every state and every vehicle and everything to go to sustainable energy. It can be done with the federal government's backing. Okay. All right. I think a lot of Western countries have some sort of date for. Yeah, I bet they do. At least in Europe, but the United States doesn't, of course. At least not one that matters, because we suck. The United States is a terrorist organization. That's why. Yeah, and some of them don't have realistic dates. And much like we're talking about here with California, right? Phasing out gas vehicles by 2035, cutting their. How are you going to do that in apartment complexes? A charger at every stall. That's a good question. Something like 2030, that'd be nice. That's if they got well, and hold on, if they had it so that all of the gas engines were converted to electric too, then it would mean something. I mean, it means something if they can no longer sell gas-powered vehicles, but that just prevents future buildup. It doesn't deal with the ones that are existing now. It's something, but not enough. So right, apartment complexes, yeah. Yeah, they could do that. I mean, you can charge your car on just normal electricity, right? Countries on themselves have very little to say about that. Yeah. And they should all, I mean, we should all be headed towards 2030. No gas powered, no fossil fuel powered anything by 2030. Anything other than that is ridiculous. It's voting for human extinction. Yeah, so there's a lot of issues there, Grizzly Bear. The United States doesn't have the powerful infrastructure set up to really do that, and that has to be part of that entire climate change war conversation, right? We need to increase the our electric infrastructure so that we can deal with charging all these things, but we wouldn't have to deal with, having chargers in the apartment complexes if we had powerful mass transportation, right? And this is one of the issues that I talk about in my policies, where our infrastructure is designed around cars, and it shouldn't be. It should be designed around walking, and it should be designed around mass transportation. That's what it needs to be designed around, and that's, if we did that, then this wouldn't really be an issue of cars, chargers at all of the apartment complexes. But that might be something that they have to do. I mean, they can just set up, honestly, a bunch of as long as they install new breakers and they can handle the throughput of charging all the cars, they could just run a bunch of extension cords from a certain area to out there to charge each car, and then they set them all up on a schedule where some charge at this time, some charge at that time, just so that they're charged up by the morning. And if they had buses going there, that would reduce it. I mean, there's lots of things that they could do. But the United States should have been working on this a decade ago. If the United States federal government cared about this, we could have had the infrastructure done already, and that's a large part of the problem. The United States hasn't done jack shit. Countries, okay, I mean, if you are the last country, then big automobile countries don't just make cars for countries. Yeah, yep. Well, I mean, right, they can still make electric cars for that country that doesn't have that law, and they'll just get all electric cars, so they'll just benefit from it. Yeah, that's exactly right. We shouldn't be concentrating on electric cars. We should be concentrating on sustainable energy and mass transportation. And that's a large part of the problem with countries competing against each other. And the United States being the largest terrorist organization in the world. I mean, the United States could have been a global leader in sustainable energy and, sustainable mass transportation. We could have been doing this for a decade, but not going to do it because corporate control of the government. Yeah, so, all right, everyone, I am at my 5 o'clock time. It's time for me to call it a day. Anaholics, Girly Bear, I'm so glad you guys made it. Thank you so much. It's good to see you guys. And everyone else who popped in, who's fairly new here, thank you so much for stopping by. I leave the end, Eddie, and Pan-Arabist Africanist. Thank you so much for stopping by. I leave the end so you guys can leave me with any sort of random comments that you want before we call this a day. Yeah, Girly Bear, thank you so much for gifting me with your time. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate all of you. The U.S. is not the global leader. It's the global drag chute. Fair. You're right. We're not a global leader on many things, but we are the global leader in terrorism. Yeah, we are the, as Trump would say it, the shithole country of the first world. In many parts of the United States, it is basically a third world country, like in Appalachia. Definitely. True statement. Anybody else? Pan-Africanist Eddie? Last moments, last comments before we call it a day? Going once? Going twice? Anything? Anything? Alright. I still love you too, Analogs. Thank you guys. Grizzly Bear, Analogs, Pan-Africanist, Eddie, thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Stay COVID free. Again, I stream on Saturdays, 3 to 5 currently. Hopefully at some point I'll put in an extra day somewhere. Have a great weekend all. I'll see ya. Peace out.